Welcome to Save As Ability, a podcast to educate and inform you about disability employment issues. My name is David D'Arcangelo, and I'm your disability policy expert.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Save As Ability. It's great to be back with you, David D'Arcangelo. And we have another David joining us today, a great guest. But before we get to David Paleologos, I'd ask you if you could continue to help us grow by liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting. All of that really does help us keep great content flowing for you. And we've got great content here today with our great guest, David Paleologos. Dave, welcome in.
It's great to be here, my friend. How are you?
Well, it's great to have you. I'm doing well, thank you. And for those of you who keep tabs on public affairs, I guess, you may recognize Dave. Dave is the head of the polling center at Suffolk University. Suffolk University, and through David's leadership, produces a lot of different polls that we see. Gubernatorial races and governor races and races for president and Congress and all the different public offices. So Dave, why don't you give our listeners and viewers here a little bit of an overview of the polling center at Suffolk?
Sure. So Suffolk University began its operations as a research center in 2002. So, we've been doing it a while, but we're kind of new kids on the block. We're not as old as Gallup or Pew or Quinnipiac, but we've had some pretty good success in terms of accuracy. People can go to the website, check out our webpage, look at how we ranked in the last midterm election, the last presidential election. And we offer students the ability to contribute questions and analyze data. So it's a great launching pad for people who want to get into research or policy or politics in general. So we're really happy, and we're as I say, we're in decade number 3, and we've had a lot of media partnerships, as you referenced. And so we have the ability to do polling on a lot of different topics, and one of which is disabilities and the problems that the public is
their
voicing
views on people with disabilities. Yes.
And the difference between policymakers and what the public is yearning for.
Yes. Well, Dave, I appreciate that overview. And you and I have been connected it's been over 20 years, I think, when I was either a student at Suffolk or teaching at Suffolk. I forget, but the Suffolk connection there. So I value what you do. USA Today, The Globe, all these other media outlets, and you're on cable TV regularly talking about all these big public policy issues. So when I approached you about these questions with people with disabilities, and you were receptive, and you have some experience family-wise with some of the questions. We can talk about that in a little bit. But maybe we can get into some of the methodologies, I guess, if you will. So you do these polls for an election, for a race for Congress or governor or whatever. But then towards the end, depending upon the poll, you put in other public policy questions on maybe like a ballot question or, is the country on the right track, wrong track? And in the case that we've been involved, we've talked about people with disabilities a couple of different times, but maybe you can give our audience a little bit of a understanding of how many people you're surveying and how you're doing it and all of that.
Sure. So most of our polling is, we do 500 statewide, which is plus or minus 4.4. It's pretty competitive. For national surveys, we do 1,000 respondents, which doesn't seem like a lot for a national survey, but it's actually pretty accurate, plus or minus 3.1. So, we've had an interesting trajectory. In the old days, David, I thought that if you became one of the most accurate or the most accurate, that was kind of the end all be all. But people have such a lack of trust for polling and pollsters. There really doesn't. I could talk till I'm blue in the face about how accurate our polling is. It just doesn't penetrate, And so what I've learned is that, it's more about, can policy be impacted by your work? Obviously, you have to be accurate to be taken seriously. And when you have the media partnerships that Suffolk has had, we have more media partnerships than any other college university in the country. It doesn't speak so much to our accuracy. It speaks more about our work ethic, that we're 24/7, we're working on weekends and all of that. But what I've learned is that people now are using Suffolk polling to influence policy because they see the media partnerships, they know it's accurate, and it becomes a tool for others to benefit with.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dave. And all of these tools, the really the social science that you're performing here, uh, you're kind of a victim of the lack of trust in society across institutions and everything else. Although I do still think the snapshots you take are valid, and it does really take a good, air quotes, like temperature of the public opinion at the time.
Yeah, I'd like to think so, but as I say, as I go around doing speeches and everything, and I put up the chart of the look, for example, Mondani. Very few people know this. We had Mondani with a point difference than what the actual outcome was. Some they were way off by 15 or 20 points, but it didn't seem to hurt them or anything. So and it did really help us in the sense that it's, oh, well, Suffolk, we expected it to be accurate. And so sometimes you're a victim of your own success in that way. So, but I'm excited about the value of the research in terms of
Yes.
impacting public policy, not only in the Northeast, but nationally.
Well, let's get into that a little because, again, as you indicated, if people can go back and look on the website, you've been more right than wrong about most things. So, yeah, the trust factor and everything else, but at the end of the day, you're able to really be a good predictor. And so when it then comes to including these questions at the end of the poll for public policy things, I think the first one we worked on, David, is as a matter of disclosure, I'm on the board of directors of the National Industries of the Blind. And when you and I had had a discussion about, hey, what do you think? How do you think public attitudes of people are about the Javits-Wagner-O'Day Act, which is the law that allows for uh, preferred procurement for in this case, the blind to be able to sole source to government. And, not to get too technical, but we basically asked 3 questions about that. And it really, I think, illuminated uh, our discussions at the board level.
Yeah, I mean, there's overwhelming support for funding at this level, which translates to increased funding. When you look at those national results, that's an important piece. It's an important tool in your toolbox. You obviously have other tools as do they, but these questions about disabilities have drawn interest among our faculty as well. And it's almost like when you're thinking about the disability community kind of growing up in a world where it's been put in the corner, not given the attention, not given the money and the resources. I feel that way among the research community, us, the polling community, and I view it as another kind of glass ceiling that I, as a pollster, can make in terms of putting these questions out there and raising public interest, because I'm not seeing a lot of it. There is some research that's out there, but it's not as commonplace as the ballot test and a political survey.
Well, and much of the other data that is out there is more longitudinal, government driven, the American Community Survey, the Current Population Survey. And we talk about that data all the time, and it's very useful. But I find your data to be very much more timely and kind of like, very specific. And I think that's useful and helpful, particularly like the data you mentioned. When it comes back like 51-49, you can say, all right, a majority. But the data we're talking about here for the NIB that we did there, that was like more than 2/3 agree that these programs should be there. I mean, that's really like a big indicator to a policymaker, to a congressperson, a senator, somebody in the administration, to be able to say, look, there's strong public support here for this.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a politician, people can say, I only believe the poll on election day. But trust me, every politician behind closed doors is looking at their own polling data, existing public policy, primary and secondary sources, all of it, the whole gamut. So when you see a question that's 70-30 or 65-35 and it's crossing party lines, that's very powerful. And
That's
we
very significant.
we saw that in the most recent polling that we did, again, strongly supported by faculty at Suffolk in Massachusetts. The first thing I look at in a question is how do Democrats, Republicans, Independents break? These questions on public support for disabilities or people who are saying that the disability community is underrepresented in films, TVs, and advertising, no significant difference by party. It's overwhelmingly um, um,
Bipartisan, yes.
yes, and
And all strata.
oh yeah, age, gender, geography, you
Yes.
name it.
Well,
And
let's
that
talk
you
about
don't
these
see that
particularly
much.
then.
Yeah.
So the first ones we talked about, the 3 questions, that was for sourcing, procurement on the federal level and products and things like that, and those programs. But the most recent one you did included the 3 questions about representation in media. And I was uh, I guess unpleasantly surprised, I don't know how to put it, that it is so overwhelming that people say, yeah, this isn't right, that people with disabilities are really not represented the way they should be represented in media. And we'll put the links in the description, by the way, so people can go and read the questions and data. But to me, again, this is not like some minor majority. This is very convincing data that is out there.
Yeah. And so many people, and of course, what I look at, even in Massachusetts, is independence, because I kick out partisan politics, Democrats and Republicans. But I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but Massachusetts has the most independents as a percentage of registered voters than any state in the country.
Yes, the
It's
unenrolled, yes.
two-thirds. Two-thirds of voters in Massachusetts were blue state. 11 out of 11 people in Congress are all Democrats, but most Democrats are in. And so I looked at that subset, very consistent. People saying that the disability community underrepresented in film, TV, advertising, by a wide margin. And it made me think a little bit about Hollywood. You've been there, you've talked to executives, and it seems like underrepresentation in Hollywood has always been other markers like race, black actors and directors, Hispanics, and it's taken one person to break the ice for like Sidney Poitier, winning an Oscar for Lilies of the Field. And then suddenly the floodgates open, in the 90s and the 80s thereafter. Anthony Quinn, Hispanic, winning an Oscar, for Viva Zapata, and opens the doors for Hispanics. But the disability community, it's not race. This
That's
is
right.
this is
It cuts across all races and all other demographic features.
exactly. So when I see a wheelchair actor winning an award, and it's only happened recently, for getting a Tony Award or something like that, that's an important breakthrough. But we really haven't had that one kind of actor, the Anthony Quinn, the Sidney Poitier, that's going to that's going to open up the floodgates for funding and get, wealthy people who control Hollywood to come around, because this is a growing demographic and it's an underrepresented demographic.
That's right. And Dave, I think you were just giving away some of your family connections to Hollywood there, because when we originally started talking about these questions, I know you've got a tie-in as well, and that kind of lent itself to us furthering the discussion and end up putting these into the poll. So shout out for Suffolk and whoever the sponsor of that poll was, one of your media outlets there, for allowing the question to go in, because I do think it's important. And I do think that people in Hollywood, I've already sent it on to people, and I'm sure you have as well. Other people have taken notice. So, it's a long process to be able to make change oftentimes when it comes to these bigger issues.
Yeah. So shout out to the Boston Globe. I mean, it was a faculty initiated. We have the policy of allowing faculty initiated questions on our surveys free of charge. So, for that purpose, I thought it was a terrific thing. My brother Nick was a film producer. He's been out of the business 20 years, but film has been important. And he, again, along with a lot of other film producers, were focusing on racial issues. He was a co-producer of Mississippi Burning with Gene Hackman.
An important
Ghost of
film, yes.
Mississippi.
Didn't that win awards?
You won the cinematographer award. It's 7 nominations or something, but it was highly nominated. In the Gloaming with Whoopi Goldberg. A beautiful family story, and those are social issues. But nobody really, and he's been out of the business for a long time, but nobody's really taken the lead on what we're talking about now and what the public is clamoring for. And I think there's an enormous opportunity for people in this underrepresented community, this growing disability community, either directors, funders, producers, and even policymakers, to take a look and say, this isn't right in the United States.
That's right.
This is not fair. This isn't right. And we've got to, make some changes. And I acknowledge, being disabled isn't sexy, and Hollywood's all about being sexy and what's attractive to, the market and all of that. But this is
Yeah,
reality.
and what I get from a lot of the executives out there when I talk to them is, in oftentimes, even like YouTube and Alphabet, we've talked about it on this channel. One of the underlying themes that we've had is entertainment on this show, and the nature or the proclivity of whether it's YouTube or Netflix or all of these other production houses, if you will, they're trying to, air quotes, protect people with disabilities. And, they want to control the content. And that's really, like, I'm really constantly telling them, like, no, please, we don't want it. Like, nobody, like, if it's an obvious attack, fine, we can sort that out. But no, we need to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, everything, because that's humanity, that's life, that's truth, and that's really what we're seeking here.
And there are human stories beyond the plight of the disabled, which oftentimes can be caricature, in past portrayals. But it's the family sacrifice, it's the day-to-day sacrifice. Like, when you wake up in the morning, what is your routine when you have a child with a disability versus someone else? Like, what's that daily routine like? What are the stressors? What are the trigger points?
Or you're not able to drive. I get clients calling me all the time saying, come by. And I'm like, well, I can't get there. I don't drive. And it adds a layer of complexity.
Basic things that people take for granted. And that's a story that's not told.
That's right.
That's a story that's not told. And, I have a very dear friend. July 4th, we went over their house. They have a child that has an undiagnosed illness. And the undiagnosed community, they're disabled, obviously, but it's undiagnosed. They don't know why, there's been, and it could be neurological, and they've tried everything, DNA tests and everything. They can't figure it out. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And that community is growing as well. And her story is a very powerful story as well.
Yeah. And we're coming up on the anniversary of the ADA. We're going to be doing an episode about that. But all right, Dave, as we conclude here, we appreciate you. I'm very pleased with Suffolk for giving you the bandwidth and to be able to do this. I think it's valuable, and not only with disability, but with other questions as well. So, we'll be sure to put the link in the descriptions. But as we conclude here, let's get some parting thoughts.
So I would say to your viewers, if you have ideas for questions, we certainly can have it reviewed by faculty. If there are things that, we poll a lot. We not only poll Massachusetts, we're doing many of the swing states for the midterm elections. We'll be in the news a lot. We do national polls, and if you, if you're interested, if you have access to a funding source, or if you just have questions that you're curious, why hasn't this question ever been asked? Feel free to contact David D'Arcangelo on this platform, and I'd be sure to take a look at it and give it due consideration.
All right. Well, David, thank you. You're doing public service here. We appreciate that. And we appreciate the great advocacy you're doing for people with disabilities.
My pleasure. Let's keep the fight. Let's go.
We will. All right. David Paleologos, thank you for joining us here today on Save Visibility. And thanks to everybody for listening and watching. Again, if you can help us continue to grow, like, subscribe, share, comment, that really does help us keep great content flowing for you. It's David D'Arcangelo, another episode of Save Visibility, and I hope you have a great day.
For more information about disability employment issues, please visit our website, disabilityemploymentsolutions.com. The Save As Ability podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel at Disability Policy Expert, or wherever you stream your podcasts. Subscribe, stream, rate, and review our shows. Your ratings and reviews help our show reach new audiences. Produced by Pod Pro Entertainment. Save As Ability lives within a network of podcasts located at podproentertainment.com. #TheNewRadio. Again, my name is David D'Arcangelo, and I'm your disability policy expert. Until next time, thank you. I hope you have a great day.